Greetings, Pahtay members. Welcome back to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I will be Patrick Smith. Tommy T on Twitter, a viewer, very kindly requested that I review and respond to a tweet by a guy named Joshua Eagle regarding the Libertarian Party and the non-aggression principle. Specifically, Tommy was asking for a response on some of the criticisms that this Joshua guy has for the NAP, and we'll definitely provide that, though it's kind of easy and kind of short and won't take long. But there's some other interesting stuff in this guy's tweet as well that we can address kind of all at the same time. So let's do that. His post reads as follows. The U.S. Libertarian Party is a failed experiment. Well, that is a bold statement to kick things off with. You can't say something's failed without referencing its purpose. So the success or failure of the statement will depend on what he thinks the purpose of the party is. A lot of people have a lot of different ideas on the purpose of the party. Who's right? Well, probably no one. It's a subjective thing. Everybody wants it to be something different. But let's see what he has to say. Without systemic reforms to its bylaws, culture, and platform, the party will never achieve its goals of, quote, liberty in our lifetime. Okay, so I guess he's declaring liberty in our lifetime as its purpose. So if that's the goal, then he's right. It already didn't work and probably won't work. You do not get liberty by asking for it. Liberty is demanded and liberty is taken. So if that's the goal, it's probably not going to happen. That doesn't mean it's not worth working towards. It doesn't mean that they won't, that there's no possibility of them achieving some additional liberty in our lifetime. Those things can certainly happen. And so why not? Why not set a goal that might even be just a little bit too extreme to be attainable? I don't have too much of a problem with that. Sure, why not? He says, I worry that it saw its high watermark in 2016 and has no likelihood of outperforming this any time in the next decade. In fact, the party is currently experiencing a full-on collapse. He says, as someone who's been an LP operative for 12 years now and seen these structural failings firsthand, I believe that only opening ourselves to the possibility of radical change can save it. Well, his perspective of it collapsing is, so this guy, for those that don't know, is what I think what many would call a left libertarian, what I would call an inconsistent libertarian. So his opinions on the current state of things is going to come from that perspective. The party just underwent radical change. The Mises Caucus took over. And I guess he would consider the Mises Caucus right-leaning libertarians. I kind of reject that distinction because most of the things that denote a person to be either left or right, quote, libertarian, are things that don't relate to libertarian principle. And they're things that these people have bolted on, which I kind of see as a net negative for any public-facing movement. You really have to keep it nonpartisan and focused on the primacy of consent and the primacy of property rights. And once you get outside of that, you're going to cause problems on both sides. So is it in full-on collapse? I don't know. By the numbers, I don't know. I don't really have a dog in that fight. I do know that before the Mises Caucus, the entire party was quite an embarrassment. Now it's seems to be slightly less of an embarrassment. That's my take. He says, to that end, here are 6 reforms that I believe the party must embrace to transform into a viable player in American politics. Okay, so it's important to note that he just changed the goal, which should change the evaluation of how effective it's been. He wants the goal to be making the Libertarian Party a, quote, viable player in American politics. That goal is completely detached from libertarian principle. It's worth calling that out. All right, his number 1. Embrace defensive alliances and reject an isolationist foreign policy. In the 21st century, we've never had a geopolitical environment that demands the existence of a defensive pact like NATO more than today. Russia's recent invasion of Ukraine makes this abundantly clear. The idea that we can withdraw from all international cooperation and still defend global trade and peace is a proven falsehood that the majority of voters see right through. The libertarian position is that governments are invalid institutions. The we he speaks of does not exist. Individuals have the right to peacefully trade with whomever they wish. Those that stop them from doing so are the bad guys. An invalid entity agreeing to go to war, if some other group of people start or go to war, is as invalid as the institution. These kinds of statist notions do not exist in the realm of libertarian principle. His number 2. Reject fusionism and fully decouple from the illiberal right. The fusion of conservatism and libertarianism has been an abysmal failure. Libertarians have been unwilling participants in the rise of authoritarianism on the right. We've watched our values be slowly eroded and co-opted by illiberal forces like MAGA, who speak the language of liberty but reject it entirely in practice. I agree. I agree that the fusion of conservatism with libertarianism has been an abysmal failure and will probably be highlighted as such in the coming months because the right is gaining traction again. It's growing in power and popularity again. And as they do so, they will think that they no longer need those principled libertarians. And you'll see ridicule increase over time as that happens. The cracks between the principles of the two groups will become very apparent in the coming future. The libertarian principles, consent and property, directly conflict with the authoritarianism of the right. But that said, I can agree that this fusionism concept is bad and fails and is unlibertarian or inconsistent with libertarianism. But he leaves out that the exact same points stand valid against fusionism with the other side, the left, which was pretty predominant in the recent years prior to the Mises Caucus takeover. Libertarian principle stands against all other ideologies, the right and the left. The only ideology I can think of that it doesn't actually conflict with would be something like pacifism, because no other ideology holds consent and property as their prime directives. All right, his number 3. Nuke the Dallas Accords. The idea that anarchists and minarchists should share a political party is absurd on its face. If you reject pragmatism, the existence of the state entirely, and want to go immediately into full-blown anarchy, working within a political party is a waste of time. There is no value in putting candidates and party leaders who reject the Constitution in front of voters. In fact, it hurts us. Well, okay, I agree. It's absurd on its face. Libertarian principle holds no space for those that do not respect consent and property as their primary guiding principle. This leaves the Pahtay hopelessly internally conflicted. While those that reject the primacy of consent and property support the existence of the state to any degree and want to be ruled, they should be ejected from the party, I'm not sure I would agree that it is a waste of time. The only value in playing the pathetic, disgusting, revolting political games is to get people who reject the invalid and voluntary authority of the Constitution in front of the world. If you're not doing that, you're not hurting the state. It might just be a waste of time. I want to take a moment to talk about the Dallas Accord, which is something I'm not sure many modern libertarians even really know about, or know what it is or how it came about. It was a compromise between two factions inside the Pahtay, the minarchist faction and the anarchist faction. It was an attempt to broaden or to take a big tent approach, as they say in political parties, to keeping both factions that completely disagree on the fundamental principles. It was in a way to like obfuscate the principles, or I don't know, put a layer of shellac over them developed where it was just unclear enough that maybe these two groups of people could coexist and work together in politics. Something I find just silly and absurd on its face. But I'm not sure people have ever actually seen the text of this thing. Let's go over it. So I want you guys to see how the language of the statement of principles was changed by the Dallas Accord. Really, 2 lines in this document constitute the fundamental thing that was changed. Before it said, "We, on the contrary, deny the right of any government to do these things and hold the sole function of government is the protection of the rights of each individual." They changed it to say, "We, on the contrary, deny the right of any government to do these things and hold where governments exist, they must not violate the rights of any individual." So you can see, this is not saying the principled position that governments are invalid, coercive institutions that should be fought and should not exist. It glosses it over to make room for both positions. The other one is, since government has only one legitimate function, the protection of individual rights, we oppose all interference by government in the areas of voluntary and blah, blah, blah. It was changed to, since governments, when instituted, must not violate individual rights, we oppose all interference, blah, blah, blah. So it's like making room to say, oh yeah, this fictitious entity that these minarchists and people like the objectivists think are possible, governments that don't infringe on individual rights. So when those are instituted, we oppose, them going bad, which is a silly, mushy mix of nonsense words. Governments that do not coerce their populations do not exist. There is no such thing. There has been no such thing. It's almost a self-contradictory term in all examples of its use. So those are the Dallas Accords that he wants to nuke. I agree they should be nuked. The minarchists should be unwelcome. This stuff should have been gate-kept instead of made into a large tent. The lack of gatekeeping is what allowed, in large part, the Pahtay to become the clown show that it has been for so many years. His number 4, and this is what I was actually asked to comment on, so let's get to it. Number 4, find a better foundation than the NAP. The NAP has a lot of systemic flaws that the public sees right through, not only geopolitically, but also in day-to-day life. Does secondhand smoke constitute a NAP violation? What about spreading COVID or letting your children starve to death? What about a first strike to ensure that the potential aggressors planning an impending war don't get the upper hand? Since the principle gets very gray when applying to the real world, it's best to find a much more clear principle to base your party on. This is the age-old, the NAP is incomplete or insufficient as a principle. And if you take the words, something along the lines of, thou shalt not initiate the use of force, as the start and end of it, yeah, there's gaps. There's holes, there's situations that aren't covered in that one-line definition. But that's not what the NAP is. The NAP is a bumper sticker that stands for complete moral philosophies that handle most, if not all, of these edge cases that he's bringing up. The NAP is like the advertising slogan. It's not the product. It's a way to get the concept of, again, primacy of consent and property into the average person's head without them having to read a book on moral philosophy or economics or, a 300-page manual of libertarianism, because that's not going to happen. That would be a failing strategy. So you need sort of a slogan. And I would say it's more of a slogan than a complete philosophy, and I don't think that's an extreme statement. It's obvious. There are these edge cases, and that one sentence, thou shalt not initiate the use of force, doesn't tell you about a lot of the questions that he brought up. You need more information. You need the fundamentals. Why is it not okay to initiate the use of force? Because once you understand the fundamentals backing the NAP, then you'll be able to make all these determinations. So this is all just to say, the NAP is the slogan, not the foundation. It's a slogan that stands for a foundation. And there are several competing foundations in libertarianism. That's what a lot of the fighting is always about. is competing ideas and competing moral philosophies, trying to back up and come up with solid arguments that give you the nap, in general, as their conclusions. Rothbard's Nature of Man, Natural Law. The Founding Fathers, Natural Law. Objectivism attempts kind of the same ends. Molyneux's UPB attempts to do so. Anti-subjectivism, the one I'm, myself and my partner in that project named Christian, have worked on. These are moral philosophies attempting to, or even if they're not attempting to, they end up with conclusions that align with the non-aggression principle. There's more work here than just bumper stickers. That's kind of my point, and that's how I address this nap question. If you guys have any questions on this, let me know. If you think I'm wrong, I'd love to hear it. Let's talk about it. This is a great and important conversation. Having these conversations in calm, respectful ways is how we move our ideas forward and refine them. All right. Here's number 5. The rest of this gets real easy. Reject bigotry. This is the logical next step once you reject fusionism. If conservatives and the alt-right believe that libertarians are a fellow traveler, you will always have a problem with anti-Semitism, race, and bigotry within your movement. You need strong anti-bigotry, pro-tolerance language to ensure that these people know that they are not welcome in the coalition. First of all, this idea that there's a coalition, that's something that stems directly from the party and politics and nonsense that has absolutely nothing to do with libertarian principle. Just like these views that he's talking about. And also, I don't know how he doesn't see this. It's still fusionism. It's just fusionism in his direction. So I guess that doesn't count as fusionism, but he would bolt on a bunch of other stuff from his side to libertarian principle. This is all irrelevant. We don't need to agree with each other on how to live our lives beyond the primacy of consent and property. It's just simple. All right, let's look at his number 6. This one, I actually am not going to read this one. It's about delegates and voting and how the Libertarian Party functions. It comes up with delegates, which then choose candidates. It's a big dumpster fire that wastes a lot of people's time, and I just don't care to comment on it. He concludes by saying, I'm sure that many of these ideas will be controversial, but if your goal is to actually realize liberty in our lifetime, it's time to kill the sacred cows and ensure our time is well spent in pursuit of a freer, more liberal world. Okay, well, that's not going to happen. I mean, it's a fine goal, but if you really think that these changes are things that should happen, Joshua, you should probably just look for a different political party. This one is supposedly, and to the degree that it cares about the primacy of consent and property exclusively above all other things, to the degree it does that is the degree that it's libertarian, and to the degree that it falls to the wayside of that and plays politics and worries about big tents and does something, or it tries to attempt to do things that compromise those principles, is the degree it's no longer libertarian or no longer consistent with libertarian principle. It sounds like you're looking for something else than that. Which, okay, a lot of people in the world do that. Just go find that. This is the answer to the minarchists. This is what should have been said instead of this Dallas Accord mealy-mouthed compromise nonsense. This party stands for something very simple on a very short list of things. It's not complicated. Consent and property. That's it. If you're going to change that and make it like a normal political Pahtay, you've lost the whole reason for it to exist. You just go play politics like everybody else. That's not what the Libertarian Party should be about. All right, so I hope you appreciated that, I don't know, chat, review, commentary, or whatever, Tommy. I appreciate your kind words and your original request. I will catch you guys later. Peace, love, and anarchy.